Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a sleep physician, and if you have insomnia, this channel is for you. Today, the second part where we talk about some problems and questions Toine has, specifically about wake therapy, a really radical way of treating insomnia. If you haven't watched Insomnia Insight 67, please do, because today's episode is a follow-up to that one. In 67, just as a brief recap, we talked about some problems and questions that Toine had emailed me about. We talked about ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and we also talked about reassociating the bed with sleep. In this second email to me, he describes something called wake therapy, a really interesting way of approaching insomnia that I hadn't really heard of before. Before we get into this, as always, what I talk about here is general advice. You yourself or together with your doctor have to decide if anything I talk about is a good option for you. That being said, let's get right into the second email from Toine. Another ACT recommendation was for light sleep restriction, in parentheses, 7 hours in bed. After several months of alternating good with bad nights, I realized that I had gone as far as I could with ACT. Thus, I opted for a more CBT-based approach. I reduced my sleep window to 6 hours and then to 5.5 hours after a setback. The smaller window initially made me fall asleep faster for a few nights, but then the smaller window failed this past Monday and produced an entirely sleepless night. I decided to parlay this 24-hour awakening into an experiment in wake therapy. And then there's a link. And I'm sharing this link, of course, here. This was something entirely new to me. I had heard of wake therapy for depression. I was familiar with studies showing that if you're awake for 24 hours, then that can help with depression. You feel a little bit less depressed. Now, what is described in the video that I have a link to again is using wake therapy for insomnia. And this is how it works. It's kind of like bedtime restriction on steroids. You start off by deciding or by committing to staying awake for 24 hours. So you're awake a whole day and an entire night. And then the next night, you are only allowed 4 hours in bed. So you've now been awake for an extended period of time, and let's say it is midnight after a previous night where you didn't sleep at all. Then you're allowed to go to bed, let's say midnight, but you have to be up by 4 a.m. So you only get 4 hours of sleep. Probably for most people, they would fall asleep really quickly and sleep pretty solidly for those 4 hours. And then the following night, you would add, 15 or 30 minutes. I think in this particular video, he talked about 15 minutes. So let's say 15 minutes you add. So you now can go to bed at 11:45 and sleep till 4. And then the following night, you add another 15 minutes until you reach like your full potential, whether that be 7 or 8 hours. And, hearing about this, my kind of spontaneous reaction is, I think it could work. Like, it's really like bedtime restriction on steroids. You start off by building a huge sleep drive, sleep pressure, sleep debt, and then you really quickly, advance yourself from 4 hours up to whatever your maximum potential is. I want to say, in the video, it sounds like it's going to be like a guaranteed success, and that you're going to reach, you're guaranteed to reach 7 or 8 hours. That may not be the case, as we talked about a lot before. A lot of us need less than that. A lot of us do really well in 6 hours. So that may be your kind of full potential, but it is an interesting method. So let's continue reading and see how this worked out for Toine. So this past Tuesday night/early Wednesday, I went to bed thinking that the resulting intense sleep pressure would unquestionably make me fall asleep. Little did I know that my mind refused to cooperate. Thus, I got out of bed and read a book for 20 minutes. Only afterwards did I finally fall asleep. It appears that my awakened mind is learning to override the most extreme sleep pressure. Hopefully, stimulus control will be the backup plan if sleep pressure doesn't work initially during my second night of wake therapy. Stimulus control, again, is get out of the bed if you're not falling asleep, get back again once you feel sleepy, only to reassociate the bed with sleeping. I would appreciate your opinion regarding wake therapy. So already kind of reviewed what it is, and I think I gave you my opinion that I think it can work. It's kind of a radical way of approaching insomnia, so you have to be very careful, make sure you don't have any, obligations when you're doing this, or that you're in any position where you could harm yourself or others if you're falling asleep. So those are my thoughts on wake therapy, and some kind of more general thoughts when I hear what you're describing, Toine. And again, not specific recommendations to you, but kind of my thoughts when I hear a history like this one. It sounds as if you, in this case, Toine, is very committed and very well read, and that you're working really hard. I do hear that you had kind of a setback at 6 hours, then you went to 5.5 hours, and then last Monday you had this entirely sleepless night and you tried wake therapy. And I really applaud what you're doing. I think you're working. I can see that you're working really hard. What I'm thinking as I'm reading this is like, it sounds like you, after 6 hours, you've made an adjustment, and then you had this really terrible setback. Then you went in another direction with the wake therapy, of course. What would happen if you decided on a 5.5 hour window or a 6 hour window, add a stimulus control, and try that for a more extended time period without making any adjustments? So let's say 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that. And even if you had one of these like setbacks, where you slept very little or none at all, perhaps over time you would notice that kind of your overall sleep wouldn't be as bad. You would have here and there a bad night, which everybody does. Everybody does get a bad night, but perhaps over time you would be doing better. I felt that there was one more thing I really wanted to tell you. Yeah, that was kind of it. I think I read on, I think I heard this on Reddit. Somebody had a history of insomnia and was now doing better, but it was describing the following. For somebody, I never really had insomnia, never had any serious problem sleeping, then if you have a bad night, it's not difficult to think of it as a bad night. I had a bad night, I know I'm going to sleep tomorrow, and that's it. But if you have gone through insomnia and you somehow are doing better, and then you have a bad night, is almost like PTSD. I don't want to belittle that in any way, but if you have had insomnia and you've overcome it and now you have a bad night again, it may very well make you think, oh my gosh, my insomnia is back. I'm going to go back to that terrible state I was in a couple of months or weeks or years ago. And hard as it is, like again, if you're doing better and you have a setback, like somehow try to think of it in the context of like an isolated bad night, and maybe not try right then to kind of think too much about it and make too many adjustments then, because I feel that can backfire if you have a bad night and then you start thinking about, oh, how am I going to avoid this bad night again? Then it kind of gets, your mind gets into that way of thinking of like, I have to do something to avoid that, and then the pressure of that new thing you're doing to work can kind of sabotage the overall reasonably good state you have gotten to. I hope I wasn't just rambling. I felt like it made sense to me as I was recording this. So I think I'm going to conclude there. I in fact have another email from Toine here, and I might just email you back, email Toine back, or I might, if I find there's something really new here, then I will of course film another video. That was it for today. If you have any problems with sleep, questions, anything else, leave me a comment or email me at insomniainsight@gmail.com. And just a quick little thing here, I just emailed Insomnia Insight and somebody has like trademarked that. So now I'm like, am I going to get a call from a lawyer anytime soon? I hope that that trademark only applies to a certain product or not, but I just want to share that. Hope to see you back here very soon, and thanks for watching.